welcome back to another video of Understanding Your Faith. In this video, we're going to look at the verse Jeremiah 29:11 and talk about what this verse actually means versus what we kind of think it means on a surface level reading. So here's what Jeremiah 29:11 says. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you," this is the Lord's declaration, "plans for your well-being, not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." If you're familiar with this verse, this is the standard, on a coffee mug, on the wall, when things are going bad, God has a better future for us and a good hope for us so we can just get through and things will work out our way. So that's not exactly what the verse says. So I'm going to give you a couple of points of Jeremiah, the prophet, who prophesied this, and then what this verse actually means. To give you some background behind Jeremiah, Jeremiah was a prophet in the kingdom of Judea, specifically, or he began his prophetic ministry during the reign of King Josiah, who reigned from 640 to 601 BC in the kingdom of Judah. Now, he was actually the last faithful king of Judah. And at this point, Judah and Israel had already split. So they had split in their history before Josiah was in power. And Israel was unfaithful. Judah was also unfaithful, although for most of their history, they were at least a little bit more faithful until Judah ended his reign in 609. Now, at this time, kind of politically, what was going on in the world is that there was a struggle between Egypt and Babylon for power, specifically over the region of Israel and Judah. And ultimately, Babylon took over at 609 BC after the death of King Josiah. And it was at this point that he took their first group of exiles. So they take over at 609. About 4 years later, around 605, they take their first group of exiles out of Jerusalem into Babylon, side note of which Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were a part. And so his ministry, Jeremiah's ministry, began around 627, 626 BC, and it lasted until he died at about 570 BC. Now, Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet because he saw many difficult things during his life. He prophesied about Jerusalem's destruction that was going to come at the hands of the Babylonians, and he even saw the deportation of many Israelites and people that lived in Jerusalem, as well as the destruction of the temple that Solomon had built. Which brings us to the context behind Jeremiah 29:11. Spoiler alert, this verse is not about escaping or overcoming difficulty. In fact, it's actually about thriving in the midst of difficulty. Here's what's going on. When Jeremiah 29:11 was prophesied, the Israelites at this moment in time were overtaken, and again, many were living in exile in Babylon, or if they were still in Jerusalem, they were under Babylonian rule. At this point, Jeremiah is confronting a false prophet named Hananiah, who claimed that God was going to free Israel from Babylon within 2 years. Side note, God didn't say this, and that actually, of course, did not happen. And so he's refuting this prophecy, and in fact, even before Jeremiah 29:11, he's talking about what the Israelites should do, and he says this in Jeremiah 29, verse 7. He says, "Pursue the well-being of the city I have deported you to. Pray to the Lord on its behalf, for when it thrives, you will thrive." Now, of course, this is not what the Israelites wanted to hear. They wanted to hear that God was going to rescue them today. But instead, he tells them to marry, to build houses, and to thrive and pray for the city that they are captive in, or the nation that they are captive in. And then it says this in Jeremiah 29, verses 10. It says, "For this is what the Lord says, when 70 years for Babylon are complete, I will attend to you, and I will confirm my promise concerning you, to restore you to this place." In other words, and after 70 years, this is when Jeremiah 29:11 is actually going to take place, which means it would be, again, about 70 years before Israel would be freed, which means almost every single person who originally heard this prophecy would not see it come to fruition. They were told, God said, "I will rescue you, I will restore you, I will bring you back to Jerusalem." But it's going to happen not right now, not next week, but in 70 years. And by the way, most of you actually won't live to see it. And so the encouragement then in this verse is that we are to live faithfully now. God is saying, live faithfully now and seek me, and I will rescue you at the proper time. That God will rescue us. He has a future and a hope, not just for us, but for many other people in the world. But it's not always going to happen when we want it to happen. And in fact, for many of us, We will not see God's full restoration and glory and hope until we are entered into his kingdom because of the sacrifice of Jesus. So again, that's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you. This is the Lord's declaration. Plans for your well-being, not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. And that's some background behind what that verse actually means.